You're listening to the CINIKRADIO podcast. Now, your hosts, Igri and Cynic.
You are listening to episode 22 of the CINIKRADIO podcast. I'm your host, Cynic, and here with me as always, my co-host, and because it's that time of year, with a mouthful of Reese's peanut butter eggs, Igri. This week the house is full, so they're going to have to take turns. Jules, Kate, and Ryan are here to talk The Walking Dead, Bury Me Here. And on the second segment, we have Ryan, Linda, Jules, and Ig. And we're going to take a stab at our favorite zombie films. We are the CINIKRADIO podcast, and we feel that if Lance Armstrong can see fit to finally tell the truth, maybe it's time the government did the same thing.
All right, boys and girls, Vulcans, Wookiees, and whatever else has been sending us all these messages. You asked it, we're answering it. This is listener mail.
All right, we've been going strong with this, so we're going to keep it going. A little bit of listener mail. Kyle from Austin, Texas writes, Rick and Michonne kept using the term a few more days. What do you think was the hidden meaning behind that?
My thought on that is it's just a few more days until we see a little bit of sunlight. We get to the end of this. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. It's just going to take a few more days to get there. It honestly means, I think they see the end of the troubling times in sight. That's what I think it means to me. They're moving forward a few more days, and they're going to get there. I mean, and it might still be a few more days in a few more days, but that's where it's going. Yeah,
to me, the term just sprang hope. It was almost like a vacation for Rick. It all melted away. It was just him and Michonne out there doing the buddy cop comedy. A few more days for Rick. It just seemed he was recharging, and he didn't really want to go back right away. It was a chance for them to kind of, get some alone time, which we saw in the van. But not only that, make a headway in their search and ground themselves as a couple. Kim from Atlanta writes, I really like The Walking Dead a lot, but will you be covering Game of Thrones when it comes back?
We will absolutely be covering Game of Thrones. It's got to be on our top 5 list of all-time favorite things. It's so good. There's so many things going on there, and nobody is safe. And we honestly love that because that shows that story can literally go anywhere. We probably will also spend some time kind of reviewing previous seasons. So even if you haven't been much on Game of Thrones, we can get you caught up. We can get you back on board and get ready for the next season. It's going to be a great season. It's going to be a thrill ride. There's all kinds of things coming to a head this next season. You're going to want to be around, and you're going to want to be part of the conversation with us.
For the life of me, I wish they would just set a return date and stick with it, because we keep hearing these maybe kind of sort of. I did see a poster that brought it back, I think, around July 11th, but we definitely will be hitting. Since we haven't got a chance to cover it yet, we're going to be recapping seasons. We're going to maybe take an overview or do a few episodes of the last season since it finished so strong. It is one of my absolute favorite shows, so it's definitely in our plans for the future. Caitlin from Middletown, New York writes, what was the key word on last week's show? You mentioned it, but I must have missed it.
Here's the thing, Caitlin. The key word is always going to be, for these next few episodes, at the end of the credits. So whatever phrase, word, or whatever's going on way at the back, that's where it's going to be. So it's going to be kind of hidden. So hopefully you guys out there listening to the reader mail right now are going to understand. Get to the end of the show, and then you'll be able to hear the key word or phrase. Write it down, save it. 4 episodes in March, and then you're going to send it in for that prize.
Miss out on that latest viral video? Didn't see the most recent trailer for the next movie coming out? In the dark about what the biggest song in America is? We've got you covered. Every week we scour the internet and look for the latest and greatest. This is What's Up.
Hey guys, my What's Up this week is HBO's new hit show, Big Little Lies, based on the book by Leanne Moriarty. I knew this show had some pretty good promotion leading up to it because, obviously it has some big hitters in it like Reese Witherspoon and Nicole Kidman headlining it. I started watching this show, and it's amazing because I find Reese Witherspoon's character to be pretty much just a toned down version, or sort of maybe a middle-aged on Xanax Tracy Flick, her character from Election. She plays this type of role to perfection. The relationship between Nicole Kidman's character and her husband, played by Alexander Skarsgård, guard can only be described as what I would say is uncomfortable and dark and disturbing, but you really can't help but to be drawn in like a fly on a wall, wondering what's going to happen next. And Shailene Woodley could easily get lost in the shuffle going against 2 Academy Award winners, but she holds her own and really proves that she's earned this role outright. It makes you think about relationships and secrets people hide from the outside world to create an appearance of having it all together. And it's definitely a little bit dark and uncomfortable to watch at times, but it's also relatable in a way that we all tend to wear masks when dealing with people in the outside world, whether they're at our schools or soccer games or at work, wherever. It's definitely something you're going to want to DVR and dive headfirst into. So Big Little Lies on Sunday nights on HBO. That's what's up.
What's up for me this week? Well, the one thing France and America can agree on is their shared disgust for fallen hero Lance Armstrong. However, time heals old wounds, and Lance sat down for a very candid interview with Howard Stern. And they took an honest look at his fall from grace. His answers were very eye-opening, and they told the story after the story. To the king of all media's credit, he didn't go easy on Lance. There were no softball questions, and surprisingly, he answered everything straightforward, including his biggest regrets and the lasting effect that his cheating has had on his family. It really gave me context, and it's definitely worth a listen. You can find the interview on SiriusXM, on demand, and I'm sure it's made its way on YouTube. Sit down, they open a can, and they eat the whole thing. And for me, that's what's up.
What's up for me this week is the Game of Thrones live concert experience featuring composer Ramin Djawadi. I'm sure that I pronounced that name wrong. Regardless, it was a really, really fun experience. I got to go to Madison Square Garden. I know that there are a few dates left, so if it's coming up anywhere where you're located, or if you have a chance to see it, I highly recommend it. If you're a fan of Game of Thrones, then you know that the music is really good, and he's one of the best composers out there right now, especially for TV and movies. And they do a really great job setting this up for the audience. I'm always a little skeptical when it comes to how do you make a soundtrack or a TV soundtrack work for in person, but they do a great job with big screens. They have a full orchestra, a chorus, a really great stage design, and a great setup for when during certain songs who's kind of featured and where they're standing. They do a really good job of, for some songs, they kind of do a montage of different things. Let's say if it's the Lannisters, they'll do a montage of different things that the Lannisters have done. And in other cases, when you're dealing with something like Hold the Door or Battle of the Bastards, they'll just outright show you the whole scene while they perform the music that was in the background for the scene. So they do a really good job of mixing things up. I can't recommend it more. I think the ending is awesome because it ends with the music from the very last episode of last season, which was probably the standout feature of the episode. As good as it was, I think the music was just incredible, and so they do a great job of everything builds to that point where they play the music from the final episode of the season. And yeah, definitely can't recommend it more. So what's up for me is the Game of Thrones live concert experience.
What's up for me is the absolute proof that spring has sprung. The return of Reese's Peanut Butter Eggs. That's right, the inner fat boy in me is coming out and letting you know that the Reese's Peanut Butter Eggs are back in stores right now. Go get some. These have the absolute perfect mix of peanut butter to chocolate. They are wonderful, and they should be eaten by the dozen. Oh my God, if you've not had a Reese's Peanut Butter Egg, go get a Reese's Peanut Butter Egg. They are heavenly, and you will love them. I guarantee it. If you like peanut butter and chocolate, Reese's Peanut Butter Eggs is where it's at. My fat boy endorses these. That's what's up.
We've been waiting for it since the beginning of the Savior's arc, since we've been introduced to the kingdom, and it's here. Does the kingdom finally rise up? Let's talk about it. Episode 13, Bury Me Here. We open the episode to somber music and hushed tones, and right away, this is telling us this isn't going to be another softcore episode like we had last week. The kingdom can definitely teach Rick Grimes a thing or two about handling some melons. We know that the solo melon held deeper meaning, but seeing it for the first time, do you feel that they could have just used a smaller vehicle and maybe just a driver to hold it in their lap and possibly just drive up and hand it to him, Ig?
I don't know. Initially, I thought there was probably something else in the truck. It really kind of looked like, man, they were really going to make sure this melon doesn't move around a lot. I mean, in a show that didn't have any humor, I did find humor in that part, because it was really all this for one single melon, and it ended up being a really big deal. But at the outset of the show, that was a little strange.
Yeah, it was a bit of pomp and circumstance. I've seen child seats with less restraint. What did you think of the scene, Julie, to open the episode?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you just said. I for sure was wondering why there was nothing else in the truck, because they were always giving so much to these guys. And I thought, is this it? Are they going to, have these guys open the door and then see, have Gavin and his crew react, and then they were going to shoot them all? I wasn't sure. Their faces obviously were very somber, so I was a little thrown.
Carol begins her journey to the kingdom. She's a badass, and death by street signs follows her. She's on a mission to find Morgan. Morgan poses a question to her: if she really found what she wanted, or was she too late getting away? Ryan, was it too late for Carol? To quote Glenn, had she been out there too long?
No, I don't think so. She needs a reason to come back, but I don't think that it's too late for anybody. And again, this world is so unique. It could drive you mad, but even madness doesn't seem to be enough to stop people.
I don't think it's too late either. I think they've all kind of gone through their own journeys a lot of times, with needing to just step back and deal with all the death and process all of it, because everyone was a normal person at one point, and now their lives are just filled with killing and death and murder and the death of people they love. And it's hard to even get a chance to process that half the time. So I think it is necessary to step back sometimes, just to regroup and get yourself together.
Especially Carol. That might be a question that would be more apt for somebody else, but Carol has previously been persona non grata, where she's been kind of thrown out on her own, and she survived for a long time and was doing quite well for herself, and then was brought back in. Carol being out on her own and doing her own thing and being away, she can come back in whenever she feels like it and be just like Carol has been. I mean, she's obviously had a big character arc from the beginning to now, because she was so meek and timid in the very beginning of this show, and now it's badass Carol and no fucks given Carol, which we all love, no fucks given Carol, but she can be out, come back in on a whim, and nothing is different for her.
We see Richard digging what looks to be a grave near a book bag. We find out later that it's his daughter's. He tells Morgan later in the episode that sitting back and waiting in a similar situation to the one they're in now in the past has cost him not only his wife but his daughter. Not giving away too much, knowing the context of Richard's story. Julie, are you more sympathetic to his cause?
I'm kind of turned off by Richard and his abrupt impulsiveness and how he's handled things, the way he kind of tried to trick Daryl. And I think everybody kind of has a story. I really don't think there's anybody who's out there that's like, yeah, I haven't been affected by anything that's gone on at all. I don't really like the way he approaches things or tries to make things happen. He hasn't gone about it in an effective way at all. So no, I'm not necessarily more sympathetic towards him.
There isn't a person in this apocalypse that hasn't had to deal with loss. And most of them have had to deal with very abrupt and hurtful loss. I mean, watching your spouse, your children, something die right in front of you, get turned into a walker right in front of you. There's been so much going on for just about everyone in this world that trying to feel bad for Richard for having gone through the same kind of stuff just is not in my wheelhouse. It's too much of a stretch. He really needs to start thinking more, or really should have started thinking more about, his actions are going to have consequences, and he might not be thinking about all of it. And that's where I had a problem with it. So no, I don't feel bad for him.
What separates Richard and Abraham to me is just catchphrases and a little bit of charm. But if you look at, there's a connecting path or connecting thread of loss. Their actions are pretty much the same. Abraham was the same way. He would have done whatever it took to get things done. Knowing Abraham's story and now knowing Richard's story, for me, it makes him a little more of a sympathetic figure.
I guess a little bit, but I don't know what it is. I guess I just connected with Abraham more. And maybe it was just his persona. Maybe it was just, that he was funny. I've never really had a connection to Richard. He has never pulled me in to want to care about him.
The king, our favorite dungeon master, and the royal gardener have a discussion about an infestation in the garden and that it must be cut, burned, but it can be hopefully replanted. Ryan, did you see or did you get a sense of foreshadowing in that scene?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that was my issue with the show is there's so much foreshadowing throughout, and and that was another great example of it. I think it was, it could have been done more subtly, and I think everything was just kind of thrown in your face. Like you've got to, look at this. This is going to have some meaning later. This is a metaphor for what's going on, and I think they could have taken a step back just throughout the episode. And I think that was the first example where I was like, oh, okay, I see where this is going. And again, if it was done visually or if it was done, with a little more nuance, I think it would have come across better than it did.
The royal gardener is apprehensive of Shiva. If you were her, would you have approached the king as he instructed, Julie?
Well, I think the king does have control over Shiva, but I can't blame her for, having a bit of a fear to approach him. I think I'd probably keep my own distance as well.
He may as well have like spinning saw blades coming out of his arms or something. No, I'm not getting any closer. What the hell? That's a loose tiger. When's the last time that thing ate? And I don't see a whole lot of meat around here. You're feeding it vegetables. It wants some meat, and I'm not going to be the meat.
I personally, even though I love pets, I personally won't go into people's houses if they won't put their dog up. I'm certainly not going to approach somebody with a tiger just sitting around kind of lazily sunning itself. What did you think of the scene, Ryan?
I love animals, and unfortunately, I probably, if somebody had a tiger and they just assured me that it was safe and the tiger seemed tame around them, I would probably be dumb enough to actually try to pet the tiger because that's how much I like animals, and it would be a terrible idea. But yeah, I'd probably if you had a pet tiger and you're like, yeah, it's fine, I'd probably would be the one to go pet it and get my hand bitten off.
And that's when Ryan George becomes lunch meat.
And he was never heard from again. We're going to take his mic and enclose it in glass and just shine a light down on it. Richard's grand plan included digging a grave, making a sign, blocking the road with shopping carts, all to just steal a melon and point out where he wanted to be buried. Did it seem a little over-elaborate for you?
Yeah, it really did, because, it seemed like he thought that everything is going to go exactly the way I want it to, and we always know that, especially with the Saviors, it's not generally going to go the way you want it to go. If you don't follow their plan to the letter, things can change. Things can change rapidly, and things can change in any direction they seem to go. Now, it was a neat plan, but, plans always fall apart. So maybe he should have thought about a little more of that.
The plan was a little too convoluted, and again, yeah, with the Saviors, you never know, because even as we saw, the plan worked perfectly. It was flawless. Every step of the way, it worked for him, and he still didn't get the result that he wanted, because you just never know how the Saviors will react. And but it does show some consistency in Richard's poor planning, because he did the same thing, the previous week, or he tried with Daryl. So in a way, it's like he consistently has these not well thought up, too clever for their own good, too convoluted for their own good plans that require every step to go right, and him even anticipating how other people, psychotic people who are unpredictable, him basically predicting how they're going to respond to his actions.
Well, it turns out that they're late to the drop, and they're a melon light, surprisingly. Gavin has the good sense to disarm the group from the kingdom, because it's about to get emotional, and they don't deal with emotion well. This is the third time we've seen Gavin. He seems to display good instincts, have a good handle on dealing with King Ezekiel, and other than Jared's outburst, he shows great poise. Ig, what do you think of Gavin as a leader?
I really like him. I really do. And it's kind of weird because he's in the group of the quote-unquote bad guys, but I like how he behaves, and I like how he handles his business. And not that I think anyone else should act that way, like in the real world ever, because it's way too direct and people would be really upset every day. But as far as a savior's mentality, as far as how they go about things, it's just Negan enough to get results, but not so Negan that generally you're going to get people rebelling against you.
Yeah, in most jobs you'll just get fired. In Negan's army, you get the iron if you fuck up. So it's one of those things where I think he's doing the best he can, but I think things would have went south really quickly, like maybe 1 or 2 meetings ago, if he didn't have the good sense to keep everybody kind of at, zero level. Ryan, what do you think of Gavin?
I read a good article this morning on my way to work where it mentions him as kind of like the perfect middle manager. Like he obviously there's some empathy there. He's not you can't say anybody that will do what he's willing to do, call them a good person, but I don't think he's as evil or as psychotic as some of the other people. He hasn't maybe been as broken down, so he responds to what's happening in a real and human way. So he hasn't kind of completely lost his humanity, but he's still going to follow the rules, and I think he knows that, like you guys said, in Negan's world, like you follow the rules, and if you don't, there are consequences.
I agree with what you're saying, because I think with Gavin, he does just want things to go smoothly. He doesn't want to have to flex any sort of power or be, trying to get anyone hurt or do anything. He just wants to show up, get his stuff, and be able to go back to Negan and be like, yeah, everything's on the up and up. We got everything. Because he knows he has consequences if it's not. You can tell he's very put off anytime something happens and is like, oh, I have to deal with this now. Okay. But I do agree with Ig. Like, I think that he has enough power behind him that shows he has that Negan-esque ability, but he does have that empathy that you do kind of side with him in a sense as far as being a leader for the saviors. He's not, a douchebag like that Jared guy who's like, we're in control and I'm going to flex my staff in your face.
The last thing you want is a staff in your face, especially early in the morning.
Right.
But
no pun intended.
One of Gavin's lines was, I went this way or I took this path because I didn't want stress. And that's kind of telling in a way, because he's like, well, I'm a savior because this is the easiest way to go. Jared is supposed to shoot Richard and he's ready for it. He's got the come at me, bro. Instead, he turns the gun and shoots poor Benjamin right in the leg. And he dies because of Richard's plan. Gavin yells at Jared to give back the stick to Morgan and get in the truck. Ryan, in your opinion, does Gavin fear or respect Morgan?
I think he respects Morgan. I don't think he fears him. He might fear him as an individual. Like if you met him in an alley, he'd probably be afraid of him. But I don't think he fears what Morgan can do to him in the presence of other saviors. So I think it's more respect, and I think he felt a little bad. So it's kind of like all right, they I'll give him this. You get your little your guy's probably gonna die. We got your weapons. We've intimidated you. You feel terrible. Let me give you your stick back. It's kind of just a little thing to give him back, but I don't think he's afraid of him.
Morgan goes into full meltdown mode, but there's something that doesn't quite sit right with me. He heads back to the cart blockade and kind of pieces it together, even though he's mid-meltdown. Is Morgan in danger of falling back to his previous "you can't clear me" static? Oh,
totally. He's in desperate need of a therapist. He's in desperate need of someone to say, Morgan, it's really okay. But, there doesn't seem to be anyone around that he can talk to because he's just losing it. And, yeah, you can't clear me state is happening. I mean, and you can see later in the episode. So while I agree with what Ryan just said about, no, I don't think he's afraid of him. I don't think he's afraid of him yet in this episode, and that's coming.
I think that Morgan has, been in this very, very thin glass case sitting on a shelf, and it needs to not be touched, and now I think there's been a crack in it, and the crack is like going all the way through this case, and it's going to break out, and it's going to go bad for everybody around Morgan that he encounters. And I think we saw it real quick when he just encountered all those walkers when it's coming and the savior should run now.
Being in his clearly disrupted state of mind, Ryan, did it seem a little odd that he put Richard's plan together so quickly?
No, because of that little talk he had with Richard prior to heading out. I think he must have been suspicious. Like, why say this now? You know, in another bit of foreshadowing in the show, it's like Richard's like, yeah, don't worry. At some point you're gonna have to kill someone, but don't feel bad about it. And right when he said that, I was like, is Morgan gonna kill Richard? But I think that he had to be suspicious. You know, they had the 12. I think it was easy enough to put two and two together, especially once he found that it happened to be in the spot where they had to, or where they had that little obstacle. You know, I could see how he put that together.
Plus, I don't think that Richard's made it at all a secret, you know, as far as like Carol and Morgan are concerned, of what his intentions are towards the Saviors. They know full well that he thinks they need to act, and they need to act now. And I think that, you know, I think Morgan's in tune enough and smart enough to put it all together.
Richard confesses and says that he will tell everyone and devote his life to leading the army against the Saviors. Ig, in your opinion, do you think Ezekiel would have ever forgave Richard for getting Benjamin killed?
Not a chance. I think had Richard lived, I think King Ezekiel would have sent him out of the kingdom. He couldn't live there anymore. Benjamin was dear to King Ezekiel, and that would have been too great a loss, and especially when it's just going against the better good, the everything that's happening, everything that they're doing, just going against the grain because you think you need to make the change happening. That would have done it for Richard. He'd have been out.
He's definitely a self-starter. What do you think, Jules?
I think that definitely shows how poor Richard's judgment is, actually, to think. I mean, he knows Benjamin's relationship with Ezekiel. To think that he was going to, you know, pay for it in a sense and have to spend the rest of his time there earning back his rate. If he actually thought that Ezekiel would have been, okay, I know you killed basically my son, to Ezekiel, but that's okay. We'll still let you hang out here. I think he was completely delusional in thinking that Ezekiel was going to, keep him around there.
When they head back to what I call the one melon meet, Richard has yet to confess to everyone what he's done, even after Morgan tries to prompt him. Ryan, was it his intent to confess, or do you think maybe Morgan's life was in jeopardy?
Oh, no, I think that he was genuinely intent on confessing. I think Morgan just snapped. Obviously at that point. And especially seeing that, I don't know that Morgan believed that it was his intent to confess. I don't think Morgan trusted him.
Morgan attacks Richard and begins does Wayne Brady have to choke a bitch? Yet no one makes a move to stop him. Ig, why didn't anyone from the kingdom or the Saviors make Morgan stop?
Well, the Saviors don't tend to get involved in their interpersonal things on the other side. They just kind of let them handle their business. They're doing their thing. Let them go. They aren't bothering us. Let them do their thing. So the Saviors, I understood. King Ezekiel did try to tell him to stop. Morgan wasn't having any of it. And I think with the ferocity that Morgan was going after it, I think everyone was just taken so much by surprise that, are we supposed to do something? Are we supposed to get in this? I really kind of don't want to, because that might turn on to me. And he looks really angry. So I think it turned into more of that, where everyone was so surprised, because it really thus far has looked like Morgan is kind of a peaceful dude to the kingdom. He doesn't look like somebody he's talked about not wanting to fight, not wanting to kill. And here he is literally beating the shit out of it and killing Richard. So that might have just thrown everybody for a loop.
I agree that could be the only explanation, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. But you'd think that after that initial shock, he's still got to choke. He's still choking him. It was a solid, minute and a half that he's doing it. That after like the first 20 seconds of shock, that somebody would stop it. Again, that was one thing that bugged me, that they didn't know.
Richard gets his wish, and Morgan buries him exactly where he wanted, sign and all. Does the loss of Richard and Abraham hurt our hero's chances against the Saviors, Zig?
I think it does a little bit. I don't know as having crazy Morgan, no fucks given Morgan, is a good thing. It's a little more interesting to watch, but it's not something that's going to help, because he's not in his right mind. And Morgan in his right mind is a very good planner. He's somebody that says, well, let's look at this from another angle and make sure we're doing the right thing. At the same time, you don't have the things that you need to have with Morgan just running loose. And, maybe you need to give him a gun now, because the staff is doing its job, but obviously Morgan's ready to kill again, and he might need knives and guns and everything else. I don't know. I think it's pretty weak. I think somebody's going to have to get to him. I think they got to go get Rick or something, because Rick is the next closest person to Morgan, I think, and Rick needs to talk to him.
All right, I'm going to go through you guys. Give me a yay or nay. Did Richard deserve to die? Ryan?
Nay. Nay in this world, yeah.
Julie?
Yay.
Ig?
Yay.
I'm going to go with Ryan on that and say nay, but I think there should have been some serious consequences to the chicanery and tomfoolery that he pulled. Morgan returns to Carol and spills everything that's happened. Even though he was tight-lipped in the beginning of the episode, he talks about Richard, he talks about Alexandria, he talks about the Saviors. With their perspectives completely flipped, he's ready to go off and kill on his own. He wants to kill every one of them, one by one. She begs him to stay and tries to reason with him. Julie, how far have they come as friends since the infamous body slam?
I think they've definitely come far, but then they don't spend a ton of time together. I think their relationship has evolved, but it's evolved into a respect of, I understand where you're coming from. I understand why you are making these choices, but I don't know, I don't think they're incredibly close. I think it's more of a respect relationship.
Once again, hats off to Lenny James and Melissa McBride for their spot-on acting, probably some of the best in the run of the series. There's certain members of this cast, this half of the season, that are making the people that choose Emmy nominations just look like fools. Does her reaching out to Morgan prove that the non-recluse Carol, mother, friend, caretaker, is still there, Ryan?
Yeah, I think so. And I think she's isolated herself for so long, but she's not very different from Morgan, right? They're both kind of, they tend to isolate themselves even when they're amongst a large population. Like they almost seems like they're always holding back and they're very withdrawn. So I think she could see in him that break that happened to her, or something similar to that.
Ig, are they two sides of a very similar coin?
They absolutely are. I think Carol has a tendency to be a little more violent regularly, but obviously Morgan has the potential to be that violent and sometimes even more. But the way that they carry themselves about things, their general mindset is very close to each other.
Carol heads back to the kingdom to speak with Ezekiel about matters of war. He puts up no fight and he agrees completely, but he says not today. Other than being slow to come to heel on the situation with the Saviors, and being the biggest cosplayer in the zombie apocalypse. But him saying not today, in my opinion, makes him the most level-headed and perfect leader for this current situation. Julie, what do you think the symbolism of the three of them planting the garden at the end of the episode is?
They're going to start again, obviously. It's just everything's been ripped out. They've all had everything ripped out from them at some point. They've all suffered huge losses where they've had to start again. And this is them planting the seeds of beginning new lives together.
We called it on this very show. Tabitha the goat had a better fighting chance than young Benjamin to survive. However, Ig, did it take away from the emotional impact of the death?
No, I don't think it did. That, I really did feel an emotional impact, especially the way he died, because it wasn't a quick death, wasn't a pop in the head or something. I mean, he had to suffer. The suffering really impacted the death in a different way. And especially Gavin yelling at Jared when it happened, that made it seem like this is a mistake. We didn't mean for this. I mean, if the impact wouldn't have been as great if Richard had gotten killed, but killing Benjamin and watching him suffer all the way up until the moment he dies, that was so impactful, and it really didn't lose anything.
Ryan, your thoughts on the episode and give us your rating.
I have mixed thoughts on the episode. I think overall, I wasn't thrilled with the episode. It was one of my least favorite of the season. I think there was everything was too much in your face. Like, it was too much foreshadowing and too much, just things didn't make sense. Like, Benjamin asking Carol to go with her, because she killed 5 zombies. Like, really, we've seen people kill many more. I'm sure he's killed more. So, that was weird. And that made me start thinking, well, maybe he's not going to survive because she said no, and then she'll feel guilty. And, as we talked about for some of the other things, just too much in your face and not enough nuance, not enough subtlety in the episode. But it did have what is, to me, one of the most tense scenes of the series. That, that scene when they find that there's only 11, and the showdown with the guns, and then they take the guns, and then he says, like, I took your guns away because you're not going to be happy with what happens. Like that. That was really tense. And then there was a bit of emotional payoff with him shooting Benjamin. And I think even though Benjamin's not a character we love, he's not, a main primary or, even secondary character on the show, there was a kind of cascading effect of his death that it affected everybody, from Richard to Morgan, Ezekiel to Carol. Like, everyone was affected by his death. So I think that while him dying wasn't as impactful, the consequences were. So I think that scene and the aftermath was some of the best stuff on the show. And the scene with Morgan and Carol towards the end was also a great scene. Again, really well acted, and they both really show a variety of emotions, and you really feel their kind of loneliness and sadness and their kind of own internal kind of despair. But it was just surrounded by a lot of a mess to me. So I would give it a 7. Sometimes I range from 6.5 to 7.5, just based on, like, again, that scene being as tense as anything on an already great show.
I sort of took issue with a few things too, but I really liked to see how Morgan's character was coming all the way around again, and that glass was starting to break, and I'm excited to see where this is going to go. But I did definitely take issue with, it was very obviously with Richard's plan. It was frustrating to see him, try to do another plan that fell through, which caused someone like Benjamin to die. But I don't know. I'd probably give it like a 7.5.
To me, it was yet another building episode. So at some point, we're going to get done building. The house has got to be finished, and we've got to actually get somewhere in the story. But it reminded me of a quote from one of my favorite movies, and it was an episode of Down Notes. I mean, and that's what life really is a series of down notes, right? I mean, Luke gets his hand cut off, finds out Vader's his father. Han gets frozen and taken away by Boba Fett. It was a down note. I think Melissa McBride and Lenny James kind of saved the show this time around, and King Ezekiel to a certain point. I'm going to go somewhere in the neighborhood of a 7 myself.
Yeah, I really liked how well this episode was acted. Great performances from Carol and Morgan. I loved what King Ezekiel did, and I really, really enjoyed how the Saviors were portrayed in this episode. That sold it for me. I'm going to give this episode a 7 as well. There you go, Cynic Radio Podcast. Episode 13, Bury Me Here from The Walking Dead. 7 all around. We really did enjoy it, but more is coming. There's going to be a lot more than the last 3 episodes of this season. We're going to be talking about it right here. Coming up, we're going to be talking about our favorite zombie movies. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've been having a good time talking about zombies, really, on The Walking Dead. They don't call them zombies. They are zombies. Get real. So we're going to spend a little time today talking about our favorite zombie movies. Maybe you've seen them. Maybe you haven't. And if you haven't, you're going to want to take a look at every one of these. We're going to give you a quick rundown. All right, Cynic, we know that you've seen every zombie movie in existence. What is your top zombie movie of all time?
Well, that's a good question, Ig, and I didn't think you were going to be starting out with me first, but we'll go from here. My favorite zombie movie is the 2004 offering, Dawn of the Dead. It's a remake, and it's directed by a little unknown at the time named Mr. Zack Snyder, and the screenplay was written by none other than James Gunn of Guardians of Galaxy fame. It sports a solid 75% score on Rotten Tomatoes, and it took home an impressive $102 million at the box office. I liked the 1978 George Romero film. I love the remake. My only critique of the movie is I hate when they break from Romero's original version of zombies and have them sprint. They were never intent for any kind of calisthenics at all. They weren't meant to run. They weren't meant to jump or drive cars or hop over shit. They're zombies. With a cast headed up by Sarah Polley, Mikel Pfeiffer, and Ving Rhames, but the movie being stolen by Ty Burrell from Modern Family and Michael Kelly from House of Cards, which were both hugely unknown at the time. It definitely has some exciting hold-your-breath moments, some great suspense, an awesome A-Team / MacGyver van build, and even a zombie baby. But to me, what really stole the movie was the soundtrack. For me, music is the most important part of any film, and Johnny Cash's When the Man Comes Around was used magnificently. And one of my favorite covers of all time, Richard Cheese's masterful cover of Disturbed's Down with the Sickness. The movie kicks off with the destruction of Everett, Wisconsin, where the survivors of the apocalypse head to and try to survive in a local mall, and then try to make their escape to the boat. And spoiler alert, like any good movie that my friend IG talked about, they take the unheard of task or tactic of killing the whole cast at the end of the movie. Outside of some silly character decisions, in my opinion, it's nearly a perfect movie, a complete re-envision and inventing of the genre. Dawn of the Dead is a great weekend popcorn movie. It's a perfect horror flick, and it's a can't miss.
Yeah, you're right. That version of Down with the Sickness is great. It's like an elevator lounge singer version of that movie, of that song. It's really wonderful. So if you haven't seen it, Dawn of the Dead 2004, check it out. Ryan George, what do you got for us?
All right, so my favorite zombie movie is would be Shaun of the Dead, which came out in 2004, directed by Edgar Wright, written by Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg, and it's one of my favorite. Like I love when a genre movie kind of infuses comedy in it in a way that kind of works seamlessly, where you can look at it as both the comedy and whatever the genre is, and I think Shaun of the Dead gets it right. It's really funny, but it also it follows the structure of what a typical zombie movie would be, but it makes fun of it, but in a way that doesn't feel like it's too much of a spoof or a parody. There's some great visual gags. They have the scene where they're trying to figure out what they're throwing records at a zombie, but they don't want to throw the valuable ones at them, so they had to figure out which records to throw. It's great. They're just the way that kind of it uses London, the backdrop of London, as like just people are just zombie-like anyway, and so you almost there. When they're focused on the main characters, sometimes you see the people moving, the zombies moving in the background are just kind of like everyday Londoners, and that they're so kind of caught in this boring, mundane life that they don't realize that zombies are there. So just really smart and well done and funny when it needs to be, and even does have some heart too. And there's a lot of great things in it. And if you haven't seen it, I really, really love that movie. It's really something I could watch over and over, as I'm sure many of us have. So definitely my favorite zombie movie. But yeah, that one is great. A lot of fun things happening in that one, and really it's kind of the beginning of a trilogy of movies. They call it, the Cornetto trilogy, right? Yeah. And I think it's the best of the trilogy. It absolutely is the best of the trilogy, but, that one, Hot Fuzz, and what's the third one? The World's End, right? The World's End, yeah. They're all worth watching, but Shaun of the Dead, check that one out. Jules, what do you got?
I decided I was a little torn. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do World War Z, which I thought was a pretty scary zombie movie. But I decided to go with 28 Days Later, which was a 2002 film by Danny Boyle. It stars Cillian Murphy and Naomie Harris. This movie I thought was good in a way that it gave me a different feel than zombie movies. It almost felt to me, well, first of all, the way they had it recorded was in such a gritty kind of manner. It felt like what it would feel like in a zombie apocalypse, but it also felt like what it feels like in a dream, that you're just running and you can't get away from something, and you're desperately trying to break in somewhere and find a safe harbor, and you can't find it anywhere. But I definitely found that this movie was chilling in a way that other zombie movies aren't, because it wasn't as blatant with the gore and the scares that like World War Z was to me. But it just sort of played on your own fears of how that would be in a zombie apocalypse. Also, when you find people, how you in this sort of situation, you all of a sudden become best friends with people you would have never encountered before. And then you lose them, and losing them in the worst ways, and then sometimes having to kill them. So to me, I found it to be an exciting type of zombie movie that isn't your standard regular run of the mill.
Yeah, and I kind of like what they did, which I think The Walking Dead kind of reused, which is the main focus, the main protagonist in the movie went into the hospital, woke up 28 days later, and it just happened. Just like Rick went into the hospital, woke up, and don't open dead inside. Kind of reused thing there, but it worked. It was really cool.
Because that's everyone's like biggest fear too.
And that idea and that even the visuals of that scene of being kind of in an empty London is something that was, I forget, what was the movie it was used again in with, I think it was used Tom Cruise.
Oh, that was in Vanilla
movie.
Sky in New York City.
That's right. And then they did it again with Will Smith in
I Am
Legend.
I Am Legend. So it's like that, but it's such a great and jarring scene, especially if you live in those cities or if you've been to those cities where it's like, there's always people, no matter what time of day, there are people, it's buzzing. So it's just jarring and such a well done idea and scene that it was reused a number of times again.
That was also used in the Resident Evil films when we see the Mila Jovovich character come up and she's just sort of staring around in her red dress. She has no idea what's happening and there's nothing. We're just left in this desolate cityscape. And I think that's, a huge fear for a lot of people is that they suddenly become very much alone.
Yeah, it's a very good point, and it's a great way to start a series and start a movie. And I mean, The Walking Dead did it to us as well. So I mean, we can see it's a reused trope, but it's a very effective one. All right, Linda, it's your turn.
I went back to the 80s for my film. I chose The Serpent and the Rainbow. Like I said, it's a 1988 film done by the master of horror himself, Wes Craven. It is a fantastic film. And it's based on an actual anthropological text that was written by this Harvard professor that goes by the same name, The Serpent and the Rainbow. Basically what it's about is this ethnobotanist, this guy who studies plants and species like that, goes to Haiti to try and find the zombie drug. Basically, there was this story that had come out of Haiti that this man had died and was coming back to life and living as a zombified slave to some sort of hoodoo master. And that's the premise, is basically this guy's going to Haiti to find some zombies. And this movie stars Bill Pullman in a role that I personally think he might have been a little miscast in, but the actual meat of the film is so good that you sort of can look over his goofy windblown hair and face. The film starts out, Bill Pullman's going to Haiti to find this voodoo zombie drug. He does a lot of research. He sort of stirs up the locals a little bit. He meets this really hot doctor, typical. Who else is he going to lust after? Anyway, this is a film that's actually like terrifyingly chilling. Again, Wes Craven knows how to do scary movies. And it's really definitely a horror film. And I think that one of the reasons that I'm choosing it for this zombie discussion is the fact that zombies, while they do play a pretty important part in the film, they aren't the focus of the film. The focus of the film is definitely the hallucinations that the main character experiences, the crazy psychological emotions that he has to work through. It's really this story of how dealing with voodoo and dealing with this Haitian magic just like turns him inside out. And this is another movie, spoiler alert, where about 2/3 into the movie, he becomes a zombie himself. He actually is dead, and he tells people, "Don't put me in a coffin. I'm not dead yet." And it's this really chilling moment where you're just like, oh no, what is happening? This is crazy. So there's a lot of cool things that happen. Again, like the way that the narrative flows from an actual story to hallucinations is really, really vivid and really scary. The way that he just keeps getting turned up inside, and the way that he doubts himself and that he's an unreliable narrator. And again, I think it's just a really, really great zombie film because it's horror. It's classic 80s horror, and it's great.
And a definite turn off of the road from Freddy Krueger to head this direction. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
Not only that, you're not just dealing with the zombie issue, but also being buried alive, which next to being burnt is probably the most terrifying thing that could ever happen to you.
Yeah, and there's just a lot in the film, again, visually, where there are snakes that are popping out and hands reaching out of cells and a tarantula crawling over his face. Like, there's a lot of that classic horror stuff happening, but it's just done in a way that makes it seem, again, I think, as in 28 Days Later, very real, very scary, and very like emotionally heavy.
All right, so good picks all. I'm going to finish it up. My favorite zombie movie has got to be 2009's Zombieland, starring Jesse Eisenberg, Emma Stone, Woody Harrelson, and motherfucking Bill Murray. This movie is great. And it takes, just like Shaun of the Dead, takes a lot of comedy and puts it in. And it really takes something and it points out the fact that there are rules to surviving. It's almost like Scream, where there's rules to surviving the zombie apocalypse, but it really points them out. I think there's like 32 or 33 rules that they actually refer to. And it's hilarious. Like, rule number 1, cardio. You got to work out so that you can run from these things. Because they're going to swarm, they're going to do things. But really, everything about this movie works. I mean, there's the humor, there's the lightheartedness, but then there's the actual thrill of being chased, the thrill of being caught, you're running, you're fighting, you're trying to get through everything. And it's scary, it's fun, it's funny, it's engaging all at the same time. So this movie had a lot of fun, and it's really where I think kind of zombie kill of the week kind of started, because there were so many interesting zombie kills in this movie that you really gotta, this is where it started. I mean, it's like, I'm gonna kill one with a car door, I'm gonna kill one with a bat, I'm gonna start whistling and get them to come around the aisles. It's so many, they killed a bunch at a carnival.
A bunch.
A bunch.
Well, it starts out, too, with Metallica's For Who the Bell Tolls, which sets the tone of the movie, but it also gives you a look at Columbus isn't a action hero. He's kind of an anal retentive shut-in, and how else would someone like him, that's super organized but not very physical, how else would he survive except by having these list of rules that he has to follow? So the movie's probably perfect in just about every single way.
This was actually the only movie I have ever liked Jesse Eisenberg in. I find him to be kind of a arrogant actor, and I loved him in this movie.
All right, so there you go, ladies and gentlemen. There's a bunch of zombie movies. Maybe you've seen them, maybe you haven't. If you have other recommendations that you think we should see that maybe you think we haven't, and good luck with that, go ahead and send them in to CINIKRADIO@gmail.com. We'll take a look. We'll give you our thoughts on those maybe in the future. Coming up, here comes Really. So now, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, it's time for Really. I'd explain it. Just listen, you'll get it.
Okay, so my really this week is ding, ding, ding. You guessed it. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. The world's greatest healthcare plan 2017. Now, I know this is not the actual healthcare plan that's been submitted to repeal the Affordable Care Act. I get that this was submitted by Texas congressman as a possible alternate to the GOP entitled Healthcare Plan, American Healthcare Reform Act of 2017. But my point is, are the American people just being trolled now by the current administration? Is it necessary to make this country look so ridiculous on purpose? It feels like we are in a live action SNL skit a good majority of the time lately. Do we need to make it so easy? So to Pete Sessions, who thought it was a brilliant idea to submit Bill H.R. 1275, World's Greatest Healthcare Plan 2017, really?
Really, for me this week goes out to Oreos. Oreos, who has a new Peeps-filled Oreo cookie, is apparently turning people's poop pink. Hey, way to product test your stuff there, Oreo. Now, we all love Oreos and everything, but we all know that Peeps are akin to putting pineapple on your pizza, which makes it garbage. So, Oreos, really?
My really for the week goes out to the people who snuck into a Paris zoo under the cover of darkness to shoot and kill a rhino in order to steal its horn. So poaching is a massive problem in Africa, with people killing rhinos, killing elephants in order to steal their horns, based on some made up medical properties. And there are some very brave people out there, doing their best to protect these populations of these kind of majestic, very smart animals. But this is just the next level of crazy to sneak into a zoo, shoot a rhino, a defenseless rhino, and then saw off the horn is just another level of evil. And it's times like this where I want to believe in a God and an afterlife just so that these people can spend an eternity in hell. That's how despicable that kind of act is to me. So to poachers in general, and especially ones who are brazen enough to sneak into a zoo, really?
My really this week goes out to a study that recently found up to 50% soy in Subway's quote-unquote chicken. When I brought this up to my partner in crime, IG, he said, well, if they were really worried about what they were eating, Subway was probably the last place they should have gone. And as telling as that statement is, if you take a good look at what's in your food, see companies like Monsanto, soy is probably the least offensive thing that you're going to find. Now, mind you, this is nothing new. If you watch the movie The Founder, even in the late 50s, McDonald's started serving us milkshakes that didn't have any milk or any ice cream in them. As a collective, people need to stand up and ask why the government continues to pass laws to protect these companies, as they continue to use our dinner for their very own science experiments. So to our elected officials sitting on their hands, while these companies profit off of making our food less food every single time we sit down to eat. Really?
And that's going to do it for episode 22 of the Cynic Radio podcast. We had a great time talking all things zombies this week, from The Walking Dead to our favorite zombie movies. Come back next week. We'll have some new and exciting things for you. Anything else you'd like to hear about, send us your comments, questions, concerns, and please send us some more Reese's peanut butter eggs to cynicradio@gmail.com, cynicradio.com. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/cynicradio, and look for us on Twitter @cynicradio. And until next time, don't get captured.
Follow the podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and at CINIKRADIO.com. Available for download on iTunes.
My fat boy endorses these.